Oh, okay. Okay. You should. This is some great, you have some really great ideas. I love your ideas so far.
Thank you, thank you. It is, I have a number of these paperbacks available to pay, and I pay the buy, and I pay the shipping and whatever. But yeah, it's all about, as I'm sure you can imagine, sales and marketing and positioning and all the logistics, boring, not fun logistics of that stuff that involve sales and marketing, about which I know very little. And a mailing list and a platform and blah 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 blah. So it's not an if, it's a when. I'd be delighted. I would be delighted. And further, just that's so much endless things to talk about in that. In I don't mean sales and marketing. There are. I'm not valuing that. They're very important and endless. But also, I had the same thing, thinking how nice it would be to have another conversation with you that wasn't necessarily recorded.
Yeah. Well, I mean, was it going through that then that led you to confidence coaching, or did you start coaching and then became a confidence coach?
I was coaching, but not specifically as a confidence coach. And so that evolved. The confidence coaching evolved subsequently in that. So when I got back from this thing around the world, that's when I really got kind of business oriented around the coaching. And then during COVID, I wrote a book about, kind of like a parable about things we don't know that we already know. And the title of the book is Cosmic Bitch Slap. And yeah, and that's how the universe shows us things that we're either unwilling to see or cannot see or don't want to see or just can't perceive. And once you get bitch slapped, you see things completely differently. And so, an example of that would be people who work in a very high stress, toxic work environment, and they don't make a move to get out of that because they're money driven, and then they have a serious heart attack or a debilitating stroke, or that's a big bitch slap. That's the universe saying time to go. So that happens to us on many levels, and mine was that coming out of the film industry, I had this huge bag of sharp shiny tools that I thought were only applicable to making movies, when in fact they were they are tools that can be applied in virtually every context in life. So the book is pretty much about how I came to that conclusion. And it's a, as I say, it's a parable. We all already know these things. We just don't know that we know them.
All right. Great. Excellent. Well, joining us today for another episode of Define Your Purpose is Jennifer Fiedler, and she's from Chicago, Illinois, and she's a confidence coach. And um, I'm interested also to hear how you got started as a confidence coach, and how that's been. I mean, I can see on it says on your profile you've been doing that for almost a decade now, huh? Amazing, amazing. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So what got you into this way back in the a few years ago?
Um, I've it's a gift I recognized a long time ago. In the never-ending dialogue of nature versus nurture. I've always possessed an extraordinary amount of confidence, and I attribute that to I'm an only child, and I was unconditionally loved and always told I could do whatever I wanted, wherever I wanted, and my mom's mantra was "Go and be you," and so I've never uh, followed a linear path in life. I've kind of, you know, high school in 3 years, 2 undergrad degrees in 3 years, and that's meaningless. I mean, unless you're like a doctor or a lawyer and you go to school to study that, and then that's what you become, but, I've never really, ascribed to that concept of linearity in life, and, in order to be nonlinear, I think it takes I'm very at ease with uncertainty and the unknown. And I've always trusted my inner voice and just kind of done what I felt like doing, and what made me feel good, and that's primarily been enhancing other people's lives, which working in the motion picture industry kind of diverted from that. But at the same time, as we go through life, I believe that everyone we encounter is put in front of us for us to learn something from, even if what we're learning is how we can enhance their lives by smiling or actively listening or, in small ways, right? And I've always been kind of the tribal sin eater in that people have always talked to me, told me things that they'll be going along and then say, "Oh my god, I've never told anybody that before." Or, I remember being very little, like a single digit, and, my mom and dad were having a dinner party, and one of their dinner party guests, came up to my room, and she was drunk, but she was telling me this story, and I remember so clearly. I was like 8, and I was like, "Wow, I'm just a kid. Why is she telling me this grown-up stuff?" Whatever. But yeah, must be something in my embodiment that makes people want to open up and talk, and they feel safe exploring things, and so kind of what coaching's all about, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So is that kind of what got you into film for the time that you were there?
No, not at all. I had gone into in Chicago as a very upmarket for fashion and catalog photography, and I started as a studio manager in a couple of catalog photography photo studios, and then I was a studio manager for a couple of high-end fashion photographers, and I wanted to get into commercial production, and tons of commercials were shot in Chicago back in the day, and I got into that and then got bit by the bug to go do that in Los Angeles, and so that was it, and I did, and I worked in that industry for about 20 years, and I'll tell the film industry is one of the most competitive, brutal, toxic work environments known to man, and at the same time, it's very exhilarating and it's very exciting, but it's also seriously addicting. And when I speak of addiction, I'm not talking about some run of the mill like booze or blow or gambling or opioids. I mean, like a serious addiction to exhilaration and excitement. And notwithstanding, that can't really block out the toxic nature of what goes on every single day. And having grown up the way I did, Hollywood is also, the epicenter of the motion picture industry and the music industry, equally soul sucking and epicentered in Los Angeles. And I just, you know, it's kind of like this insidious virus that everybody catches. I call it being Hollywood, becoming Hollywise. So you forget who you are and where you're from and which end is up, and your moral compass is no longer evident. And we all witness this to some degree or another, people working in the industry. But I'll tell you, man, after 20 hours, years of holding that at bay, my arms got tired, and, I knew I was burned out, and I dropped out, and then I freaked out because I couldn't figure out what I would do, and, that engendered a 180-degree thing of, if I don't do this, what would I do? And, I went to UCLA and got certified to teach English as a second language because I speak some languages, and I'm kind of a teacher by nature. And, boy, that kicked off this epic adventure that was spanned 4 continents in 10 years and, just really changed kind of my, so many of our job, we don't realize how ego driven it is, and my job was one where I get paid to manage time and people and tell 100 people what to do all day for 70 hours a week. So, that's not really not where it's at, that's not what life's about. Of course, in the little spaces in between, we enhance people's lives, we run into people. I've lived and worked all over the world, but it was a big focus shift from, something that I was doing for whatever reason, ego gratification, the money, this, whatever, this the scenario, right? The hippitude, the hype, all of that good shit. And yeah, so I during COVID, so I kind of more formalized confidence coaching for people because so often I find, I'm sure you do too, that people who are coaches, it's all about I went through this hideous trauma and I can help you get through the same trauma. And my life has been untouched by trauma, which at first made me kind of like, wow, well, is that, do you have to have gone through trauma to be an effective person coaching people, but it's almost like confidence similar to working in the motion picture industry. People who aren't in that industry, when they hear that you do, they wanna get close and touch. I want a little piece of that, you know? And confidence is the same way. People, "What how come you're so confident? Why are you so real? Why are you so authentic? Why are you so willing to speak your truth? Why?" And my tagline is kinda, "If I can do it, you can too. Anyone can. It's just a matter of self-perception." Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, was it going through that then that led you to confidence coaching, or did you start coaching and then became a confidence coach?
I was coaching, but not specifically as a confidence coach, and so that evolved. The confidence coaching evolved subsequently in that. So when I got back from this thing around the world, that's when I really got kind of business oriented around the coaching. And then during COVID, I wrote a book about kind of like a parable about things we don't know that we already know. And the title of the book is Cosmic Bitch Slap. And yeah, and that's how the universe shows us things that we're either unwilling to see or cannot see or don't want to see or just can't perceive. And once you get bitch slapped, you see things completely differently. And so, an example of that would be people who work in a very high stress, toxic work environment and they don't make a move to get out of that because they're money driven, and then they have a serious heart attack or a debilitating stroke, or that's a big bitch slap. That's the universe saying time to go. So that happens to us on many levels, and mine was that coming out of the film industry, I had this huge bag of sharp shiny tools that I thought were only applicable to making movies when in fact they were they are tools that can be applied in virtually every context in life. So the book is pretty much about how I came to that conclusion. And it's a, as I say, it's a parable. We all already know these things. We just don't know that we know them.
Right. Right. It sounds like it almost like all that traveling made you realize your own gifts after being stuck in Hollywood for so long.
Definitely. Well, and in that environment, yes, absolutely, because, yeah, it really blots out the sun, that environment. It's even the best intentioned people, I'll remain myself and what I and like I say, it's a virus, it's insidious, you find yourself going like, "Wow, she does the same thing I do. Why is her Porsche so much newer than mine?" Or, like sick shit like that, and yeah, that's life, that's normal, and so that's not normal, and that doesn't have to be life, and, thanks, but I'm done. Peace out, man.
Right? Yeah. Good. Awesome. Awesome. So, what got you into coaching then, while you were traveling, and what made you realize that coaching was your thing? I mean, you wanted to help other people with the realizations that you had had.
Well, yes, as I said, I had been coaching prior to that. I mean, whilst working in the motion picture industry, because so much of it involves active listening, and I'm really good at asking questions, and I've always been very real and kinda no bullshit, like, mollycoddle whatever. It's like, "Hey, man, here's what you're doing. Do you get it? Do you want it? Do you not want it? Do you" and people often, not always, but often respond very favorably to that instead of the kind of circuitous, "Let's unpack this," kind of I'm not into jargon at all, So, people appreciate being spoken to in a real way, not some ass kissy way a lot, and they often are not spoken to that way, and that often really cuts through a lot of mental chatter or resistance or creates epiphanies of like, "Oh my god, I had no idea I was doing that, really?" So, I have done that for a very long time, and it's only subsequent to say obviously writing this book. It was during COVID and writing this book that I changed, kind of shifted, lane merged into confidence rather than life coaching. So that's to say that confidence coaching around obstacles people have about being authentic, speaking truthfully, and mostly for women, particularly this idea of enoughness. You're enough just the way you are. And I also kind of limited down into female clients because I didn't realize I didn't realize the gender specificity of how many women feel lack confidence, feel like they can't speak, feel powerless, feel like they can't be their authentic self, don't exercise their curiosity, all the things that make us that build confidence are very loath to take responsibility for what they've accomplished. Rather, this endless beating themselves up and second guessing decisions and not trusting themselves, and so that I must say that was kind of revelatory for me because I haven't been plagued with those things, and to realize how many women are that's virtually ubiquitous. No matter how strong the woman standing in front of you looks, it's ubiquitous, and so that fascinates me, and that's something that I became very motivated to ferret out and eradicate because it's really no way to live, and it's all about conditioning and not being able to look inside and really see what's going on and whatnot. So awareness engenders growth, regardless of what we're doing. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. No, it sounds like you're a real force for change there, and what you're doing. I like how you're kind of inspired to fix this this issue, that you take on directly like that. That's really neat. Um, So maybe I mean you also have kind of narrowed your focus. You found it very different, the confidence issues that men face, I guess, in our culture.
Absolutely, absolutely. Men also face confidence issues, but they have much, uh, they have more to for men, their confidence has more to do with what's going on external to them, whereas for women, it's all strictly internal. It's very little external stuff, and prior to doing only women, the coaching, a lot of the work that I did with men was more around relationships and managing them and managing emotions because guys tend to be no emotion. That's not women swim in a sea of emotion, and we're very tend to be very comfortable there, whereas men not at all. And it's all some degree of cultural programming, or your parents, your caregivers, your educators, your religious figures that when you're a kid, it's people you look up to and trust and believe what they say. And one way of looking at it is, as a child, we're told many things by people, as I say, that we trust and that we perceive as godlike. Because as children, our parents are like gods, and these people are unquestionably uh, authority figures for us, right? And children are very literal minded. We don't develop the ability to be figurative either in speech or thought or whatever until much later. So as a child, we take things very literally. Yeah. Don't make that face, your face will freeze like that. And whatever, all the shit that we're told when we're kids, right? And and as we grow up, as we turn into adults, those children are still inside of us, which is cool. I mean, it's great. We all have an inner child, which is something to be revered and honored and encouraged. However, we still filter what we're told through that kid rather than through our adult self. And so this makes for big problems in relationships and in life of you're listening to input as though you were a child, and you're not. You're a grown up. And so if you don't get that you're doing that, it's really hard to not do that, right? And obviously children filter information very differently from the way adults do. And so making that connection that, like, oh wow, that's right. That's like I'm a kid. Like an issue with women is a need to ask permission for things. Okay, well, you're not a little girl anymore, and there's no need for you to ask anyone for permission for what you do. And permission is different from, say, "Hey, Carl, I was thinking of making some fish tacos for dinner. Is that cool with you?" I have not just said, "Carl, is it okay with you? May I please make fish tacos for dinner?" I'm including you out of respect in that decision. Or I'm not treating you like a child to say, "And tonight, Carl, we're eating fish tacos." I'm trying to include you in that so that everybody wins, right? Whereas asking for permission has to do with, "Can I make fish tacos for dinner tonight?" And yeah, and for guys, also, gender, regardless of gender, we just don't really have a handle on how this dynamic works. And so women would ask for permission, and the guy's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever," because you don't really care what I make, you're just really hungry and want dinner, right? Which you would never say to me, "Well, geez, Jennifer, I don't give a shit what you make for dinner. How soon can we eat?" You would not say that to me. But if you did say, "Hey, whatever you make is fine," women don't know what to do with that because it needs some stamp of approval, which is another way of saying permission. I need you to give me permission to do what I planned on doing for dinner. And my point is, don't blow off your plans and don't like ask permission like a 7-year old. Treat that other person like an adult and include them in what you're doing. And I learned a lot of that working in the film industry because it's all about communication. And what really really messes totally jacks all of this up is mm, I'm sorry, let me rewind for a moment. I had the tremendous privilege working in the film industry of watching how men work and assimilating good things about the way men work. And those are some of the tools I referenced earlier. And the thing about men is the workplace, that there is no emotion in the workplace. And I'm not talking about emotional intelligence, about being able to gauge, your team or your person working for you or whatever in an EQ kind of way. I'm talking about the difference between a difficult conversation and a confrontation is emotion. A difficult conversation, for instance, would be for me saying to a producer, there's no way we're going to get to that scene today because this didn't happen or that, and it's not going to happen. But I've already dialed it into tomorrow's schedule when it can happen, and it won't cost us anything more to shoot it tomorrow. And to make sure I have time to get to it tomorrow, I've pulled this scene forward from tomorrow that we will be shooting this afternoon. So that's a difficult conversation because that producer doesn't really want to hear that. And yet it would be it what I just did is lacking in emotion. Whereas when that producer says, "Jennifer, are you fucking kidding me? What do you mean we're not gonna get there?" Ah! And then I get all like, "Oh, well, I didn't mean to, and it wasn't my fault, and blah, 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 blah." That now that's a confrontation, right? Because there's emotion introduced. And women in the workplace, women come to work with emotion, and that's highly problematic. And so pretty much everything we do is with emotion, and we just don't recognize that we're doing that, and we certainly, because of that, are lacking in the ability to discern when that's appropriate, when that's not, when will when our agenda will be achieved, when it will not. And so many things are like that. And so with men in the workplace, if your boss is the kind of guy who likes crawling up your butt so far you can taste his hair and he gets off on being controlling and abusive, as soon as you start explaining, well, I did this because of that and because of blah, 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 now you're defensive, being defensive, instead of just being, yeah, well, it happened. That's the way it is. I've rectified it or I've preempted it or I will do whatever. And so it'll all be fine. That's a non emotional response. But when people get defensive, it's like dogs smelling a squirrel 2 miles away. People can smell defensiveness that's very viscerally palpable to us, and we behave very differently in the face of people being defensive. Some people, a predatory instinct comes out, and they just go for the jugular. Other people get really angry, like, "Can you just tell me what's going on?" People react to defensiveness.
But it's almost like a reframe to just step aside from that when you see that coming on from yourself almost, right?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, and be listening to, like, what is coming out of your mouth, man. And the simplest thing is I countless times I've taken a drubbing in some baby producer's trailer, who's having a bad day because someone higher up the food chain has shat upon him, and he's, rolling it out on me. And it's like you stand there and you wait till they're done, and then you say, terribly sorry. That will not happen again." And then you make damn sure it doesn't. So that's all it takes. I don't have to, I don't need to interrupt. I don't, and which is another thing. I did that once, and the guy was like, "Wow, I can't believe you just like let me rant like that, and you didn't interrupt me and try to like make me feel better or try to make the circumstance better. You just listened." And that's huge. So it's kind of that kind of stuff I'm talking about when somebody's on you about something. We don't have to prolong the conversation. I'm terribly sorry. That will not happen again. So it is a big reframe without going into your tap dance of, well, but I did it because of that, blah, 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 blah. Like, no.
Yeah, yeah. Like it happened for whatever reason. Won't happen next time. Done. That's great. I love that. That's a great point. Um, so I'm also curious about your book. It that recently came out.
Actually, it didn't. I pre printed Cosmic Bitch Slap. Uh, yeah, it's called, the subtitle is Accidental Discoveries Complements of the Universe. And so it's kind of like, it's a book, as I said, about what went down when I decided to drop out of the film business and that whole like mental process and what happened and what I did and leaving Los Angeles and living in Korea for a year and getting out of Korea and living in Warsaw, Poland for 5 years. And I went beyond that, but I ended the book in Warsaw. And so it's kind of, it's a bunch of it's a memoir, but it's kind of the Jennifer the Idiot story. It's a fast, funny, fast, fairly compelling read, but it models behaviors, and it that's how I think, for me, that's been a very successful coaching modality, is the storytelling angle of, you know, here's that reassuring people that you're human, that happens to everybody. And that happened to me, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, really? You? Yeah, yeah, really, me. Happens to everybody, right?" It's the human interface with the embodiment of consciousness, right? The where the embodiments of consciousness in a skin bag, and that's the interface where the inside touches the outside, right? And so by sharing this, it's encouraging and inclusive. And the so much of uh, so much of a big tool that I use is analogies, the ability to make connections and make analogies between something that's happened in the past and something that's right in front of you. And by doing that, we bring the unknown into the realm of the known, and we can remember, oh, I remember this is like that, and I did that at that time, and oh, and I can do this now, and that sense of accomplishment, because you're solving a problem or finding a solution to something, and that instantly boosts your confidence, right? So the story, it's a lot of stuff in there of just analogies, things that happened to me that I discovered on this journey. And yeah, so it's I've pre-ordered. I ordered a very limited print run paperback edition of this, and have been pre-selling it for a while. And on the day we'll do Kindle. And originally I wanted to do Audible. I want to read it myself, and of course you have to have published on Kindle before you can do Audible. And I'd published on Kindle in the past, but this I haven't yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. You should. This is some great. You have some really great ideas. I love your ideas so far.
Thank you, thank you. It is, I have a number of these paperbacks available to pay, and I pay the shipping and whatever. But Yeah, it's all about, as I'm sure you can imagine, sales and marketing and positioning and all the logistics, boring, not fun logistics of that stuff that involve sales and marketing, about which I know very little. And, a mailing list and a platform and blah, 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 blah. So it's not an if, it's a when.
Okay, good. Well, maybe you could talk a little bit more about how you help people, maybe who have some of these issues, like you're talking about, always reacting as a child and taking everything in as a child, or always reacting in an emotional way. Um, how do you help someone step away from that, who is kind of habitually involved in that sort of.
The first step is, oh yeah, for real, for real. Well, the first step is awareness that that's what you're doing. And then there's a tiny little gap between thoughts. Viktor Frankl, I don't remember the quote exactly, but in the space between thoughts is choice. And it's a minuscule space. And that's also when we meditate, that's the space between your thoughts is the stillness of infinity where you can get inside meditationally. But just this understanding that we have a choice. And so it's like you're made aware that you're doing something. And that, so now oh, that, right, right. I do that. Yes, I do that. And with that awareness, now the next time happens, and it's not like shazam, now you don't do that anymore. But what it is like, that awareness is like, oh shit, I just did it again. And the more that happens, right? Because we do it takes practice. And the more that happens, "Oh, shit, I did it again." It becomes it's establishing a different neural pathway, and, right? So, a lot of that's another eventually, that change comes where you're not catching it after the fact, you're catching it, "Oh, I'm not gonna do that." Your consciousness shifts into a different place, a different lens, if you will, where, yes, now I can recognize that, "Oh, dear, I'm about to do that, but I don't wanna do that," and then you don't. So, it takes practice, everything starts with awareness, and so often we're just unaware of, you know, uh, Hindu the Hindu culture, their cosmology and their thing is like we're all asleep. We're not awake. People who aren't enlightened or who aren't down with the oneness of consciousness, we're just not aware. We're sleepwalking. We're asleep. And so it's kind of like waking up to, there's different worldviews, there's different, the world is a big place and it's very diverse. And to wake up to the fact that those things exist, but they're equally valid to your worldview, and they in no way, they don't need to threaten your worldview. In other words, to move away from the my side or hit the highway mentality to, oh wow, that's cool, that's really different, and without, again, being emotional and taking that as like, "Oh, well, what's wrong with mine?" That nothing, man, take it easy, will you? Nothing's wrong with yours. This is just a different one. And these are all things that are dictated by human nature, and it's just, do you want to transcend that into human potential, or do you want to stay in human nature? And so that's the people who go to coaches, who use coaches to help them learn and grow and evolve and move towards a higher level of consciousness, are people who see that and want that. They just don't quite know how to do that themselves. Yeah. And so, another huge thing is risk taking, right? People are highly risk averse, which, of course, it all kind of, the foundation is we all live in our head, and not in our heart space. And your head will tell you anything, your ego, the voice, the big voice in your head, right? Whereas the reality, the truth of who and what you are is in your heart space. And that is in no way condoned in our culture here in America and predominantly in Western European cultures. Other cultures are much more are more down with that. But this idea, because we live in our head and it's all about perceived logic and rationality and whatever, rather than a feeling that says, "Yeah, go for it." We're very limited, and and it creates this kind of fatal inversion of um, I I need to control circumstances around me, and I need to reside in the known. I'm only comfortable if I'm controlling what's going on and I know what's going to happen tomorrow. Very common, and that's human nature. We're all human. That's the
And some of that is ego too. I think, and how do you, maybe part of your coaching is how do you separate ego from confidence?
right. So yes, continuing. The inversion is you think you're safe in the known because you're controlling things around you, but what you fail to see is that you're very limited. It's limiting because you're only operating within the parameters of what you know and the known. So it's kind of like the same thing with uncertainty. The unknown and uncertainty, the un in those words is the same un in unlimited. So if you say to someone, "Do you want to be limited or do you want to be unlimited?" Of course, they're going to say, "Well, yeah, I want to be unlimited." Well, then you have to get comfortable with uncertainty and not fear the unknown and be able to take risks. Because, like, the biggest risk in life is never taking any risks. Yeah. And so, where this a real world example of how this works is um, when I left Korea and I spent 6 months in India. And then I came back to Los Angeles. I was living in LA at the time. And I went on this road trip to like hook up with friends I hadn't seen for a long time, blah, blah, whatever. And I ended chilling in Joshua Tree National Park. A producer pal of mine family had a family house there and it was empty. And he's like, "Yeah, sure. The keys under the cactus, whatever." So, whilst there, I was really enjoying the solitude and the vast. It was very calming and very good. It was a great thing, to not think and not talk and not drive and just be out there and experience being a minute particle in the oneness of consciousness. And the word Poland kept dropping into my consciousness, and I'm like, "Poland? What the fuck, Poland?" And I blew it off, but it kept. I would like wake up thinking with the word Poland, like, is this vestige of a dream, or like what's up with Poland? And finally, it happened enough times. I'm like, okay, fine. So my plan with teaching English as a second language had always been to work with adult professionals, ideally in the entertainment industry, to help them with their conversational English to level up on that. And they all want idiomatic English, but also practical English for the film industry or the photography industry because they work. English is the lingua franca in those industries. Yeah. And so I had been researching like France and Italy, and I speak French and I speak some Italian, and places I'd been, the familiar, not the unfamiliar, the familiar. Great food, blah, blah, speak the language. So Poland, like, wait, what? And I started researching Poland and I knew nothing about it. It's a huge country the size of Spain or Germany with massive infrastructure and, international banking and lightning speed internet wireless connections, and tons of opportunity for people for what I wanted to do. And so I was batting that around, and one day I sat down at my Mac and I was like, I got on Orbitz and I'm like, why not? Let's just like check it out, man. And Orbitz had this great price flight, and I bought a one-way ticket to Warsaw. I had no job. I had no housing. I knew no one there. I don't speak Polish. I'd never been there before. And that's how I roll. I bought the ticket, was so excited, and then, took all the steps necessary to get my shit together so that I could depart on that date and whatnot. And so my point is, I've told that story to people and women who are like, "Oh my god, you're so brave," or "Wow, that's really inspiring." The inspiring part is good. And so what I, as a woman, didn't do for a long time was take ownership of that, because I'd like blow it off like, "Yeah, well, come on, after producing movies, of course you can do anything," or, "Yeah, well, I'm good at foreign countries," and I would just kind of blow it off. And so what I needed to take ownership of and eventually did was, yeah, that was brave. That was a big risk, but it wasn't a risk because I trust myself and I know what I bring to the table, which is to say, getting a job is about networking. I've worked in Hollywood for 20 years. Your livelihood is all about networking. That's how we get our jobs. We're all self-employed, right? Getting housing, even if you don't speak the language, I mean, you can learn quickly what the Polish word for like bedrooms or whatever, and I have a personality. I can like talk to anybody, and so sign language and a smile and a positive, a good attitude, a non-critical and open, being open opens doors around the world. I already know how to do that. Friends that can come later, and so what I'm saying is trusting what I know how to do, who I am and what I know, minimized the risk. And I ended up living there quite well for 5 years. And so, like in the film industry, an analogy would be when Tom Cruise executive produces a film he's starring in, executive producers provide money. So Tom Cruise knows what he'll bring in on opening weekend box office gross. That's a known quantity to him. How many millions of dollars that movie's going to make the weekend it opens, and that then informs his decision about how much money, how many hundreds of millions of dollars to put into that movie, because he trusts himself and he knows what he brings to the table. So this is where we fall down with, and that mitigates risk. That changes the whole scenario, right? So this is where we fall down in a failing to acknowledge who and what we are and our strengths, and we all have big bags of sharp shiny tools that we just blow off and don't own. Taking ownership, acknowledging ourselves and what we know, and then trusting ourselves that you can do that shit anywhere in the world, man. And so I couldn't speak to how men regard what I've just laid down, but I'll tell you, women, that's like revelationary, truly, to trust yourself, and even in small ways, like, go ahead, cook a meal without a recipe. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Why? Why, man? Like, go for it. So this is big. It's a big part of all of us. Just perhaps bigger part for women than for men.
Right. I like the phrase "act as if." So if you want something, then act as if you already have it, and you'll be on that frequency to have it rather than to want it.
Absolutely. And so much and relative to manifestation, I have 2 things to say about them. The first one is act as if means it's already a fait accompli, right? It's already happened. And we've all been everybody who's Christian is taught to pray, ask God for something. You're in supplication. Please give me this. Okay, you're never gonna get it. You have to act as though it has already happened, right? So this is a huge, like, whoa, wait, what? All prayer is supplication, is asking for something. In the Islamic world, we pray like this, which is symbolically indicative of I'm ready to receive what I'm about to get. It isn't supplication. It isn't please give me. It's I'm ready. Let's go. So the other thing about that is I love like neuroscience is a hobby. I love neuroscience, right? And so this idea of our brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And in order for us to create new neural pathways, when those little dendrites are all like, right? That happens when, whether it's real or not, that process is accelerated when there's deep emotion involved. Our brain responds to emotion because our brain is a survival supercomputer, right? It wasn't put in us to make us thrive. It's a survival supercomputer. That's all that matters is survival. Stay alive, keep breathing. So when we act as if it's already happened, the critical part of that is really fleshing that out of what it looks like, what it feels like, what it to make it palpable, to make it tangible, right? But more importantly, what would that feel like to you? And to experience that feeling, that's what moves the needle, right? And so, like, gratitude practice, mine is I'm so happy that I'm like, for example, I'm so happy that I acquired an abundance mindset, and I'm profoundly grateful that I can see the abundance that surrounds me. So I have like 10 of these that are something I'm really happy about, and how profoundly grateful I am for a result of being that, as if, right? So when we do that in gratitude, it's not like your Trader Joe list, right? Soy milk, coffee, frozen fruit, blah blah. No, 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 no. It has to be. You got to feel it, man, and that it's very hard for people to do. And so that not only helps our brain make those new pathways, but it's also gratitude trumps stress and anxiety because you can't hold gratitude and either of those other things in the same space at the same time. I challenge you to try to be anxious or stressed and profoundly grateful. Dude, no way, man. That can't happen at the same time. So, all of these things are ways that we can become more aware, better at recognizing, like, what are you doing, man? Recognizing that, and it's very important to, take ownership, acknowledge as humans. Again, we remember every time we fucked up, and we rarely remember, not only remember when we did a great job, but what that felt like, right? Because here in the here and now, perhaps we're facing some horrific challenge, right? All you have to do is remember like a touchstone of, oh, I did that and that happened and I felt like $1,000,000. And now you have a highly effective tool that has just shifted your perception about what you're right now perceiving as some huge obstacle or challenge or, oh my God, what am I going to do? Dude, you already know. But you have to remember that feeling and that act, whatever it was you did that made you feel that way, that needs to be called forth, if you will, and like thrown inside of you to give you what you need to surmount this challenge with trusting yourself and certainty that, of course, I can do that.
Mhm. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Like you were saying before about opening up that pathway in the brain to know that thing, that action is possible for you.
And to have to focus on, so the awareness is, oh, I do that all the time when I jacked something up. It made me feel like an idiot, or it made me really angry, or okay, that's very easy, right? Everybody does that. Far more difficult and challenging to remember your accomplishments. And so I have this little game like with clients of, for me, I imagine this little, you create a real tiny little container inside yourself, of course, figuratively speaking. Very tiny. It doesn't matter what the container is, but it has to have a lid on it. It has to close and open. Yeah. So mine is this little bitty basket. And in there, what you put in there, and this is something you can like sit down and write and make a list of all of your accomplishments and what they made you feel like. So let's take the one I spoke of earlier of buying that one way ticket to Warsaw, and I didn't know I had nothing, and I lived there for 5 years. Uh, what that made me feel like. And so you make this list of all of that, and then figuratively, you give each one a touchstone. So mine are like stones, literally, and a touchstone being something physical that when you touch it, you remember it, you rubber band to something, right? So this is a figurative touchstone. It can be stones, it can be crystals, it could be seeds, it could be it like whatever, man. But you collect them in that little box. And so whenever we're faced with something that seems very extreme, challenging, an obstacle, a problem, whatever bad word you want to use, I open that little box and I kinda stiffed around in there, like, "Oh, I remember that one." Mine are different colored stones. "Oh, I remember that one. Oh, here's the one I want. Oh, here it is. When I bought that one-way ticket to Warsaw and it made me feel like I could do anything, I hold that, and that the touchstone is made to remind us, what did that make you feel like? Because it's all about, you gotta feel it, man. It's all about feeling, and I remember what that made me feel like, and that that feeling that the touchstone represents is what fuels me to address whatever's in front of me, or to say to myself, "What are you, nuts? You know how to do this. You did that. What's the problem here, man? You did that. What's the problem?" It's what fuels you, catapults you almost into the present moment of self-trust and and owning that you accomplished something, and it's that feeling that's the thrust of the jet fuel, if you will, that launches you to solving this dilemma, problem, challenge, issue, word of your choice.
I love that. What a great technique to create a little space like that for yourself. That's awesome.
Thank you. But I mean, it's important to remember that stuff, Carl, right? Because it's so easy for us to blow off. And I had one client who said, "Oh, I made a list of that." And I'm like, "Really? Show it to me." And she goes, "What do you mean? It's in my office, in my desk." I'm like, "Why? When was the last time you looked at that?" And she's like, "I don't know, like last year. I made it a couple years ago." Okay, right there. That's my point. You made it. Good for you. Good. But you haven't looked at it in 3 years. And so of course I didn't say that to her. I said, "Oh, cool, cool. I get it. It's in your desk. Well, do you remember it?" And she's like, "Well, yes, of course." And I said, "Could you share with me some of the things that are on it?" And she couldn't because she forgot them. So, I mean, and I'm not like ragging on this lady. We're all the same in that regard. That's why having a touchstone, a figurative touchstone, that's why that's important because we need to keep that unto us in order to, overcome whatever challenges we're facing and to keep reminding ourselves rather than the bad, so
Yeah, your brain automatically, for some reason, drags up the past trauma. You have no problem remembering that time you were embarrassed in third grade or something like that. Like, who needs to remember that?
absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I was talking to somebody else who she takes it even further. She liked my like this little story I just told about the little container and the stones and shit. And she was like, you know, I go the step beyond to try to create a toxicity around the bad memories. And I'm like, wow, I don't know if I'm down with that because I don't know. And what do you, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like some venom spewing asp or something. But that's her process and what she does. And I listened to it, and my first thought was like, "Oh my god, that's so much work." I mean, I have a hard enough time with clients getting them to make their little box. Like now, I'm gonna like keep that going and create this like venom spewing asp. I don't think so. But the other thing that strict for me personally, some of these negative things, it's helpful to remember because there are times where there's no doubt about it, you like jacked that up, man. So to me, by rejecting that, you also have to take ownership, be accountable. It somehow is in conflict for me with accountability. Yeah. And and one of these, like a weird example, but I keep this in the little box. So the little box doesn't have to be all about this wonderful thing I did and it made me feel wonderful. In my box is a stone where I remember very clearly when I first started freelancing in the film business. I lived in Chicago and we all start at the bottom and matriculate up, and a PA or a production assistant is the lowest thing on the totem pole, right? And I was a PA, and this producer called me to hire me on a commercial he was doing, and I missed the call. And I missed the call for like 2 days. And of course, by the time I returned the call, the guy was like, "What are you nuts?" Click. And I cried. I was so upset. I cried about, and I like, hair pulling and crying, and oh my god, and so that was like the first job I went out for, and after all this self-flagellation and misery, I worked in that industry for 20 years, man. So like, I keep that in the box because that reminds me, dude, you don't have to overreact, and that's another thing we do as humans, that's very human nature. "Holy shit!" It it doesn't have to be a holy shit moment, It just calm down, man, calm down. It's all good. And so everything in the box doesn't have to be, "Oh, I did such a good job." I keep, like, little bad not the right word isn't bad, but I mean, that stone is in the box too because that reminds me when I take that one out that, okay, so you fell down and then you did it for 20 years. So what are you whining about now?
Yeah, yeah. Just like being a good friend to somebody else doesn't mean you're always nice and complimentary to them. It means you're also sometimes critical, and you can be that same way to yourself, I guess, right? And be a good friend to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we just need to be reminded. And whatever it takes to remind you of something positive that you can own. So that was a positive reminder to me. Like, if I now or a week ago or whatever. I don't have a concrete example, but something I tried. Well, I do. Like I'm struggling with this marketing, as I told you, for the book and coaching and whatnot. And it's all about like email newsletters and shit I'm very disinclined to do because I like designing and creating and designed my website and that part of it. And I was very disheartened one day about writing this email newsletter, and I shipped it off to friends of mine, and they were like, "Oh no." And I was like, "Oh God, am I ever going to get the hang of this?" And I remembered that stone. That I went into the little basket and I picked out that stone because I was kind of reacting that way to like, okay, the first one, it's the first one I wrote, it totally sucked, blah, blah, whatever. And touching that little stone was like, okay, and what did you do subsequently for 20 years? Oh, that's right. And that helped me like, okay, what's the rush? Just calm down, man. It's all good. Right. So yeah, you get it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's great. So you help people from all walks of life, I guess, with confidence. I mean, there's more. I think that's so important right now. There's more change happening faster and faster. People are switching careers and all right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. My clients have been, I'm a Gen Xer, so that's been a lot of Gen X women, but with a sprinkling of millennials.
Right. So if someone wants to, I mean, if someone listening wants to get a hold of you, I guess maybe your website is the.
They can Google cosmic bitch slap, and there's a hyphen. Bitch slap is hyphenated, and it's the first thing up on the Google search page. Well, is my homepage. And, yeah, it's all in, contact and social media links and, all of that good stuff, and learn kinda about my journey. I have, of course, a link for the book. I have, a number of short stories. Some of them are excerpts from the book, others are just short stories, and, yeah, and the coaching programs are fully outlined and explained, and yeah, so Cosmic Bitch Slap will take you there.
Awesome, great, great. Well, I have some events coming up and maybe a book launch of my own. So, I'd love to collaborate more and maybe I could help you with your marketing somewhat. We could have some more conversations about that. And
I'd be delighted. I would be delighted. And further, just, that's so much endless things to talk about in that in I don't mean sales and marketing. There are. I'm not valuing that. They're very important and endless. But also I had the same thing thinking how nice it would be to have another conversation with you that wasn't necessarily recorded.
sure, absolutely, that would be great. But I really appreciate you taking the time today. I mean, what a great conversation. Thanks so much for so openly sharing all your thoughts and great ideas here today. We really appreciate it.
I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunity and for you opening the door and inviting me to do it. Thank you very much.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. We'll have to catch up again soon. Um, Thanks, Jennifer. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Karl. You too.